Right, Bharat Sundaresan, cricket writer and broadcaster supreme. The legend joins us from Adelaide. Thanks for your time, Bharat. Wonderful to see you and to hear your wonderful voice once again. So what did you make of the T20 series? Disappointing washout, obviously. And what are you expecting in the 5-match ODI series?
Firstly, I would be happy to see a few people in Australia watch that series, man. I'll be very, very honest with you. This is September. And as you know, through your travels, and you too, Harmy, this is football season, and this is finals season, one day in September. They even sing songs about it. So the only talk of the town is about football, and it doesn't help that these T20s have been played at, I think most games have started at 2 a.m., if I'm not mistaken, Melbourne, Sydney time, and then the one-dayers will start at 9 p.m., so you'll probably see a few people tuning in for the first power play and then probably heading to bed. So it is going to be a little challenging to generate a lot of interest. But having said that, look, a little more star strewn this one-day side as compared to the T20 side for Australia. But yeah.
But from that, I know there might be not many people watching in Australia, but there's a Champions Trophy on the horizon, not far away. There's some fresh faces in that Australia side. What are we going to learn, or what are Australians going to learn going into this series with one eye on the Champions Trophy from a selection point of view?
Yeah, and I think there will be more interest, Harmy, about this one-day series from an Australian cricket circle sense because there is that Champions Trophy. The T20 series, well, yeah, they're building up for 2 years from now. So, they have enough time to do that. But, you speak of the fresh faces. Some in Australia are surprised that some well-known faces are still around, because when Australia won that 50-over World Cup last year, it felt like a lot of them, would go out on a high. I mean, Steve Smith and even some of the fast bowlers. But it looks like Australia, anyway, are prioritizing that Champions Trophy, which is why I see a lot of them in this side. Having said that, I think it'll be a question of, with David Warner gone, once again, it comes down to what that top order looks like going forward. And there are a few new names in there, or newish names in there anyway. But the middle order looks like it'll be the old force of Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne and Glenn Maxwell and co. So, but there will be a lot more interest from the selectors anyway on these 5 games. Because Australia do play a handful of ODIs, but then the focus will shift completely onto that Indian Test summer before the Champions Trophy.
Barrett, I don't know whether you saw it, but our dear mutual friend Jeff Lemon wrote a preview in The Guardian in which he said how important this series was and how much there was depending on it. And you just knew that he was writing under instruction. The editor was like, we need something positive, could put a really positive spin on this. Because let's be honest, all games are not the same. All games are not equal. George Orwell wrote that 70 years ago. And this is... Anyway, I wanted to ask you about 2 players, Jake Fraser-McGurk and Travis Head. How exciting is the former? And did Australians realise 2 years ago how brilliant Travis Head could be or might become?
I don't think Travis Head himself realized that, Manners. Here in South Australia, we don't produce a lot of international cricketers, as you know, but when they do, they get very excited about that fact. And Travis Head has been a South Australian hero for the last 10 years. They made him state captain when he was 21, and I've seen him play some incredible white ball innings. Yes, we've seen what he can do in Test cricket in the last 3-4 summers, but 2 double hundreds in list A cricket, and he's one of those batters who, once he gets going, it's not always pretty. I always like to say Travis Head bats like he speaks. At times he doesn't finish his sentences too well, but that's how his batting is. It can not make sense at times, but when it comes off, it's destructive. And look what he's done across formats now. We saw it in the IPL and in the T20 series in Scotland, and even the other night against England. He changes games in 1 over. In one-day cricket, as we saw in the World Cup final, he changes games in a few overs. And in Test cricket, in an hour of Travis Head is often enough for Australia these days.
And Mitch Marsh takes the captaincy. Pat Cummins, is that going to be or do you think that's a sign of what's to come with? You've got an Indian summer, then and sort of our England Ashes coming over in our winter this time next year. You think the captaincy of Pat Cummins will predominantly be Red Bull, with two massive Red Bull series is coming up, and the white ball trying to be protecting of the captain?
I would think so, Hami. And look, even for Pat Cummins, what a great way to finish his one-day captaincy if that's what he wants to do. It's not that he's captained a lot in 50-over cricket. He was two matches in when he started the World Cup campaign last year. But he's been very, very clear that he was not going to play any white ball cricket. He wanted to rest himself for that big test series. Don't forget, Australia want to stop India from pulling off a three-peat. Like, yes, they won the last two times India, but if they can do it again, it'll be quite a statement if it isn't already. So Pat Cummins is focusing himself on that. And Mitch Marsh, at least at the moment, has been earmarked as that white ball captain. So I won't be surprised if he continues on, not just in T20 cricket, but then he takes over in one-day cricket as well.
The Border Gavaskar Trophy is incredibly exciting, and India's 2 wins have really set this one up, haven't they? I mean, let's not forget, South Africa didn't win a series in Australia for almost 100 years, and then they won 3 in a row. So I lots of questions. I mean, I guess the majority of the Australian team you could probably write in ink now, barring injury. But who is going to open the batting with Usman Khawaja, and will it be Cameron Bancroft, or does Steve Smith want to carry on?
I'd be very surprised, Manners, at least for the first 2-3 test matches, if they bring anyone outside the top 6 that they have. I think Andrew McDonald has been very clear that he's identified, or they have identified as a selection panel, that the 6 batters they have right now with Khawaja, Smith, Marnus, Head, Marsh and Green are their top 6, and in whatever order they play, that's the 6. So Bancroft unfortunately might have to wait his turn, and who knows, maybe it'll be someone else who jumps the queue. I mean, they've always gone to Matt Renshaw first before Bancroft since 2019 Ashes. Steve Smith, an interesting one. Like, look, there's one side of it where people say, well, he's still got just 4 test matches and you need to grow into your opener's role. Simon Katich said that recently because he also went back to opening the batting towards the end of his career. Usman Khawaja and Manas Labuschagne have been very vocal about they would prefer Steve Smith in the middle order. But then who opens? I mean, a couple of days ago, the new revelation has been that maybe Mitchell Marsh might be the guy who goes up to the top, which should be quite an extreme move in my opinion. I mean, if Steve Smith was extreme, Mitchell Marsh, who clearly said last year when there was debate around who will replace David Warner that I don't want to be that guy. So, but I guess that decision's been taken away from his hands. But yeah, I mean, it's good for us, Manners. We can keep speculating for the next couple of months because there's not much else happening.
I must admit, from a bowler's point of view, and I think Steve Smith's one of the world's greatest batters, and the modern generation's up there with the likes of Kohli, Root, Williamson. But if I was in England's bowling attack, I'd be happier Steve Smith batting at number 1 than batting at number 4. And if that did happen and Steve Smith nicked off a couple of times, does that cause, the selectors in Australia even more problems? Because not only do they have to find an opener, if the middle order's firing, you're not going to drop Steve Smith. You're just going to move him down to somebody that might be scoring runs. And do they need clarity on that going into what is going to be two big series, 10 test matches, India and Australia? And as well as that, I'm going to do what Manus does, ask you another one at the same time. What happens if one of these 4 fast bowlers, because it just seems as though they will play 10 test matches if they can get through them because of their durability is unbelievable. But is there many coming through where you go, well, if we lose one of them, who's going to step in?
There are a lot coming through, Hami. There's Lance Morris, the wild thing they talked up last year. He was supposed to potentially start off in New Zealand, but then he got injured. He wasn't part of the squad. Riley Meredith has been doing the rounds. He was part of the T20I squad, but I think he's fallen off the radar a bit. Jai Richardson, every time he gets a chance to play Test cricket, he takes 5 wickets like he did against England in the Ashes in Adelaide. But he keeps breaking down. I guess you have Scott Boland and Michael Neser, both of whom are 34 now. So they're reaching that point in your career where it feels like do you look ahead and take a punt on a Lance Morris, or do you go back to Scott Boland? So Australia have already been extremely lucky, as you said. The fact that they've gone with these three for so long without touchwood and not a lot of injuries. Josh Hazlewood missed a lot of cricket between 21 and 23 test cricket anyway, but he's come back strongly as well. Having Nathan Lyon helps. I mean, the bowler who's bowled more De Villiers than anyone else in test cricket in the last 14 years, so that's always a big bonus for them, which is why I think Pat Cummins has also spoken a lot about how Mitch Marsh and Cameron Green will have a big role to play, which is another luxury they have of two all-rounders, in that top six. So I think you'll see them play a big role. And to your first question, I mean, that was the big gamble that Australia took when, in a way, they succumbed to Steve Smith's desire to open the batting, where you left yourself with no out. Like you said, what happens if Steve Smith keeps failing at the top? You can't drop him, he's Steve Smith, but then how do you move him down? Because Cameron Green, the whole logic was, okay, Cam Green wants to bat 4, and he played a great innings. It looked like he finally came of age in Test cricket, that big 100 in New Zealand. So now, even with this talk of Steve Smith dropping down again, and if he goes back to number 4, wouldn't it be unfair on Cameron Green, because you've looked at him as a long-term number 4? So a lot of questions to be asked, but that was a risk they were always willing to take with Steve Smith going up to the top.
Cam Green said a couple of days ago that he'd put his hand up if it meant Steve Smith batting at 4. So we could, I mean, he's technically very good, isn't he?
He's extremely good. And personally, Manners, I was of the opinion that when David Warner retired, and if Australia were understandably desperate to bring Cameron Green back into the side, that he should be the one opening, because he can play fast bowling really well. He leaves the ball really well. He's worked a lot on his technique. His head doesn't fall over anymore. So I think technically he's very gifted. I think number 6 was always a problem for Cam Green at this stage of his career, because he just struggled to get the tempo of Test cricket. And I'm sure you guys saw it as well every time he got a chance, even in England last year. But opening the batting, I thought, would suit him a lot. But it also tells you a lot about this current Australian team, where, they do like to talk a lot about blokeship and mateship and brotherhood, don't they, in Australia? But it is real in this setup under Andrew McDonald and Pat Cummins. They are willing to, do things for each other, make sacrifices. So I would go with Cam Green. Between us, I would really stick with Cam Green and push Steve Smith back down to number 4, especially with the 2 big home summers coming up this year and next year.
You mentioned the big home summers. Just finally for me, Barrett, the Ashes, it's not far away. It's going to be on us very, very quickly. What of everybody in Australia when they're waking up in the morning and seeing some of the pattern collapses, or seeing the way England have played over the course of this last English summer? Are they more confident now, or are they less confident, or are they just still see this Bazball as it won't work against our four-man bowling attack?
I'll be very honest, Ami. Even now, anytime someone mentions Bazball in Australia, it's followed with a because that's just the reputation Bazball seems to have in Australia. I don't think anybody takes it seriously for now. I mean, if England come next year and smash Australia and win the Ashes, then maybe they'll wake up and take it seriously. It doesn't help when England, lose the way they do, even if it's just one test. They do turn on Bazball very quickly. But I'll tell you what, I mean, there's a Aussie rules football team, Hawthorn, who lost last week. They have started playing this version of highly entertaining Aussie rules football. I wrote a column comparing them to Bazball, and now they call themselves Hawkball. They've lost as well. So both Bazball and Hawkball lost last week. But I think what Australian cricket fans are more excited about, Hami, is about seeing Jofra Archer back and Mark Wood bowling at that pace. I think it would be wonderful for the Ashes itself if those two can stay fit. And some of the others as well looked impressive. Gus Atkinson is someone everybody's talking about as well. So I think it's more the bowling that's exciting Australia right now. Whereas when it comes to the batting and Bazball, well, we'll wait and watch.
I'll tell you a little one about Mark Wood at the weekend. We were watching, obviously, it's the last cricket match of Ashington's season. And he was messing about with, he is a kid. He's messing about with the kids in the corner. And they're playing Heidi Bosik. And he come and stood next to me, and he sort of stood sideways. And I was like, what on earth are you doing? And he went, I'm hiding from the kids. So he was playing Heidi Bosik behind me. So it just shows you how fit he is and how unfit I am. So he was hiding. I was ready to pull his head off, but no, he's in good order. He's in good spirits, as you from that story. And I think if Jofra and Mark come and they do play, say, 4 test matches each, I think Bazball might just work in Australia.
And just on that, I mean, I think another guy that everybody's in Australia has been impressed with is Shoaib Bashir. Like, they've always come here with finger spinners who are more side spin dominant. We saw Jack Leach being taken down early on in the last series 3 years ago. So if Shoaib Bashir can continue his rise and continue bowling the way he is, he bowls like an Australian off spinner, doesn't he? I think he could play a big role, because that's one thing England have always lacked here. Someone just holding one end up. And if that can work, who knows? Like, yeah, it will be a fun series regardless. But yeah, that could be a vital cog as well.
And finally, just for a laugh, give us a prediction for the ODI series, and more importantly, for the Border Gavaskar Trophy.
Ooh, I think ODI series, Australia will win 4-1, but I think of what, like 500 overs, maybe 120 overs will be watched by an Australian audience, like which will be pretty much the first power plays of each game. I'm not even kidding. It's probably the worst time to have a one-day series away from home with the football on, unless, like, late into the night you're watching in a pub, the football's happening, and then the cricket follows. As far as the Border Gavaskar Trophy goes, Manners, I have a feeling, and this is a serious answer, boring answer, but I think Australia will win purely because looking at India's fast bowling stocks, there's way too many injury-prone bowlers there. I know they won with net bowlers last time, but something about this current lot, Pat Cummins and Andrew McDonald, I don't think they'll panic like the previous 2 Australian teams did. So yeah, there you go. How Australian do I sound? It's also like, just a matter of time before I get my citizenship. But so I'm also very careful about, always talking up Australia wherever I go.
Bharat, absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for your time, and have a good evening in Adelaide.
Thank you so much, Manus. Can't wait to see you guys next year.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.